would you build navigation elements within your app? And how would you present data through different means? So, announcements. Again, if you're unable to make a discussion, please, we can check you off on office hours or you could private ed us. I think discussion 4 was released this Saturday and it's due by discussion this week. And discussion 5 will be released on Friday. Um, our mid-semester project. So you're basically creating an app. Well, we basically built a skeleton for you, but there's sort of some tasks for you to require for you to kind of implement. And you're going to be building a class planner, so like a schedule planner kind of thing, where you could add classes, you could and more. And so that's going to be released later sometime today. And it's due in 2 weeks, so that will be due on the 20th. Okay, so for today's agenda, we're going to talk about what extensions are in Swift, and we're going to talk about how you can create your own custom view modifiers. And then we're going to talk about navigation elements. For example, how do you create a tab bar within your app? And another big thing is navigation stack. And so we're going to talk about how you could, add or push views and pop views on top of your current view. And then I'm going to introduce some kind of like presentation elements for you to, that are available for you that you can implement. Okay. So extensions. So what are extensions? So extensions allow you to extend existing types. So they allow you to add functionality to existing types and to make them to do things that they weren't originally designed to do so. And so extension in Swift, you can add computed properties onto a class, for instance. You can define new instance methods on a class or struct. You can provide new initializers. You also can make an existing type to conform to a different type protocol and more. So, so in prior semesters, we had this project where you basically were creating like a wallet app, and it's called Cal Finance. And on this credit card view, there was this view modifier called apply credit card bottom shadow, right? And apply credit card bottom shadow is not something that Apple gives us, right? This is something we created from our very own. So this is how you would create your own custom view modifiers. So here you can see we have a struct and it's conforming to a view modifier. So view modifier, remember, it's a protocol, and basically a protocol just simply lists some requirements. And one of the requirements that view modifier requires, so if you want to be a view modifier, you have to implement this body function, and that returns some view. And you get this content. This content is whatever you're applying this view modifier onto. So in this case, I'm applying this view modifier on this credit card view. So content is actually this credit card view. Okay. And so that's what content is. And so on content, you're able to apply whatever, you know, you know, view modifiers that you want to kind of augment it. So what we're doing here is that we're actually applying this background, and it's also this shadow onto applying it to credit card view, if that makes sense. So basically, again, this content is whatever we're applying, is the view of whatever we're applying this view modifier onto, which is this credit card view. And then we could define our own kind of custom things that we want to apply to it. And so, and the second step is actually making it accessible to any view. So we create a function called apply credit card bottom shadow, which is the one right here. And we wrap it around a modifier and we add it to extension view. So what that means is that whoever is a view has access to this function, apply credit card bottom shadow. This credit card view is a view, right? Because why? Because, well, it's a struct, it conforms to view, right? And so it has access to this now. So basically now we can basically create this view modifier and we get credit card view passed into content, and then it basically applies these view modifiers onto content, which is again this credit card view. So, just to kind of give you a look of what it looks like. So here in the code, you could see this was our credit card bottom shadow view modifier. And here is also another view modifier that basically adds like a background. And so it adds, it sets bold, foreground style, padding, background, and it makes it like have rounded corners, right? So basically we're getting this content. And again, this content is whatever we're applying this view modifier onto. And we're just basically transforming it by applying these our own custom, like whatever view modifiers that we have here, right? And so we need to make it available or accessible to every view. Now, how do we do that? We add it to a view by extending it. So on extension view, we basically add or have a kind of like helper function here, and it returns, we create the view modifier instance, and then we just wrap it around a modifier. And that allows us to access this method on any view. So if I right click and go to show callers, I could see who's calling this. And here, right, you could see somewhere in this code. Okay, don't worry about it. But here we see that this text is a view, right? So it has access to dot apply indigo background. And same thing for this view, right? How do I know, for example, balance amount view is a view, right? Well, here, right, when we create a custom view, it always conforms to the view protocol, right? So balance amount view is a view. And so when I go back to my declaration of the view modifier, again, here we're basically saying if you're a view, we're going to add this new method, right, that you can access. And so that's why balance amount view has access to apply indigo background. Okay. Does that make sense? And now why do we want this? Like, why do you want to create your own custom view modifiers? Well, in this case, right, we're using it two times here, right? Sometimes, again, you don't want to repeat your code, right? You don't want to, again, this right here is the same thing as, uh, it's basically doing this. Like, let me just copy this, go back. Uh, it's just doing that, right? Um, but with the custom view modifier, I'm able to kind of encapsulate all of these view modifiers into one single thing that I could just, use it, reuse it elsewhere in the code. And so, again, just to make sure I'm driving it home, this content right here, right, this content that's being passed in is this, okay, in this case. And then for a balanced amount view, it's this, this thing right here. So does this make sense? Okay. Yes. So is it like basically. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Any other questions about this? Cool. All right. Um, all right. So that was extensions and custom view modifiers. And again, you can also extend on any type. So for example, let's say I want on an integer, I want to get a random integer. In Swift, there's a function to do that. I could show you a bit in later on, but it's like, there's like, int.random, da 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 da. But you could just create a new like function on the integer type and you could say int dot get random integer. And, and so you can basically write custom functions and make it accessible to the type itself, basically. All right. So now let's talk about some UI elements, or sorry, navigation wise, which is the first one will be tab bars. So tab bars are, I think we've all seen tab bars in apps, right? They're usually located in the bottom. Now on iPad, it's a bit different because there's a sidebar sometimes, and sometimes its sidebars collapsed. You have like a tab bar on the top. So it's a bit different on different platforms. But if we're just talking about iOS, this is what it kind of looks like in iOS 26. And in this case, we have this kind of new accessory view that, for example, in this, I believe this is the music app, this could shrink and this could basically, as you scroll, sometimes this could shrink down the middle and this kind of shrinks into two pieces here, which is interesting. But again, this is a tab bar. And so you use a tab bar to support navigation. not to provide actions, right? When you tap on a tab bar item, right, one of those tab bar icons, it's not like a button where you like run code, right? It's only for navigation. For example, you tap a tab bar. You don't want to make a network request when you're tapping a tab bar, right? Item. You just want to move to a different screen. You want to make sure it's visible when people navigate to different areas, right? So it's always visible. You want to use as few as tabs as possible. So you don't want to have your tab bar with like 10 different tabs, right? So usually it's around like four. Four is like the sweet spot. And for each tab item title, you want to use something succinct or concise. So if you look at all the Apple apps, you don't find like view your music library items, right? It's just library. Or um, view your collections, right? In photos. It's just collections, right? So just it should be like a single word that succinctly describes what that screen does. And tab bars also support badges. So sometimes on different apps, you can see on the top right corner, there's like a red icon with a number, right? So that could help suggest or kind of lift information to the user that says, hey, there's something going on this tab that might require your attention. So this is what uh so this is what so this is a kind of demo that I'll be doing, but basically this app is like a student kind of tracker. Don't worry about the duplicates. It's just like I just have a finite set of students. I'm just like randomly generating them, so don't worry about that. Just excuse the duplication. But yeah, this is sort of the tab bar here. So you can see we have two tabs, one of the students tab, and we have one of just, if there was a settings tab, this will be the settings, okay? But just for simplicity's sake, it's just a settings tab. So how do we do this, right? So as you can see, right, let's go to the app file. So remember here, every app in Xcode has a special file that is like the entry point into the app. So when I run your app, this is the first thing that gets kind of the first root of your view hierarchy, right? So here we could see um, that we have our window group. And again, this window group is sort of like on different platforms, there's different windows, like management. For example, iOS, there's only one window, but on iPadOS, macOS, you can generate multiple windows of the same app. But don't worry about that. Anyways, here we can see we have a tab view in SwiftUI. And it the subviews of it are your different tab items. So in this case here, this is my students, list of students, and this is my settings view. Okay, and just a text at this moment, right? And so how do I configure the icon and the title and also badge of each tab bar item? Well, it's via this view modifier, tab item. So here you can see on content view, I have a tab item with the label, and label is also another SwiftUI view, which basically usually has a text and has an image associated to it. And so here we have students and we have this SF symbol person.3. And then for the settings, we have the settings text and this gear shape. And that's basically it. So if I want to have more tabs, I just basically, basically here's your view, right? And then you basically on that view, you have a tab item with the label and system image and so forth. Now you have three tabs now, right? So let's take a look back at the simulator. So as you can see, here is the system image right here, person.3, and here's the label title, and that's reflected right here on the bottom. Okay. Any questions? Okay, cool. Again, it's very simple, right? It's like a couple lines of code and they could implement a tab view within your app. Okay, so that's tab bars. Next, let's talk about navigation stack. So navigation stacks has it's hierarchical. So what that means is that, for example, I think the most kind of really prominent example of a navigation stack is the settings app. Again, this is a bit older version of iOS, probably iOS 8, 9, maybe it looks like. Anyways, but here we have on the main tab, right? When you open the settings, this is what you're greeted with, right? And when you click on, for example, general, what happens, right? A new view gets pushed on top of whatever view you're looking on, right? And then, for example, let's say I want to click on auto lock. You click on that, and a new view gets pushed on top of what you're looking at. Now, on the top left, usually on iOS, right, there's usually a back button. And you can click on it, and it just removes that view. So now you're back on this view right here, right? Oh, and then once you click on this again, it goes away, and then you're back to this view, original view. What's actually interesting is on iOS here, you could actually hold down on the like you could press and long press on this back button, and you get a list of all the different views that were pushed. So now on this view, if you hold down on general, you could basically go back to the settings, this original settings page from just one tap instead of having going back. If for those who don't know. Okay, so that is basically the hierarchical app navigation that we could implement using navigation stack. And well, from the name suggests, this uses the stack data structure. Okay, so hopefully you are familiar with it. But if you haven't, we can go through what a stack data structure encompasses. So a stack data structure is what we call a last in, first out kind of data structure. And what that means is that the last one in is the first one to get out, right? So for example, in our settings page, right, the last one that we see gets removed first. So let's imagine these these letters are our views. So this is the original settings view, right? All right, so we push so that there's two operations when it comes to a stack, or two main ones. One of them is push, one is pop. Push is basically you're adding it to the stack. Pop is when you're removing something from the stack. So here in this case, we push A to the stack. All right, let's push B to the stack. So now we add B on top of A. And then we push C to the stack. So now C is on top of B and A. Okay, so now let's remove. So we do pop C. So we're about to pop C. So C gets removed because it was, again, it's the last one in, it's the first one to get out. And then we just pop B. So B is about to get removed. And then finally, we're back to A, right? So hopefully that gives you a better visual understanding of how a stack works. So under the hood, navigation stack uses a stack data structure to keep track of what views are being pushed and how are they relative to other views. So navigation stack is a SwiftUI view that allows you to present a stack of views over a root view. And again, the root view is basically the first view. And you can add views to the top of the stack by clicking or tapping a navigation link. And a navigation link is also a SwiftUI view that you wrap around a certain view. And basically, it usually supplies a arrow. And when you click on it, it will basically push something on top of the stack. And you can remove views using built-in platform appropriate controls. So for example, when you use navigation stack, you get things for free. For example, that back button on the top left, that you don't need to code it yourself. And swipe gestures as well. So to create navigation links, you can associate a view with the data type by adding a navigation destination view modifier. And this allows you to you can programmatically push and pop views on the navigation stack. And again, we'll see more of these view modifiers and how we could utilize them. So that goes into programmatic navigation. So we can programmatically using code to push views on top of the stack and also pop things off the stack. So depending on the data type, we could push a different view. And we can manage the state of navigation stack by initializing the stack with a binding collection of data, which is navigation path. And that allows you to read and write to the collection, and you can observe and alter the stack state. And what you can do is that you could push different like data types. For example, I'll push an integer, I'll push a string, or push an image. And depending on the data type that's being pushed, you could, you know, push a different type of view associated to that data type. And again, let's take a look at what this means in practice. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the app, and as you can see here within the app itself, right? When I click on this list, again, excuse the duplication, but when you click on this list, what happens? Oh, did I think I accidentally, wait, what happened here? Um, that was weird. Wait, let me, sorry, did I accidentally remove something? Um, oh, I think I accidentally did. Yeah, never mind. Okay, I'll just, here, I'll just, okay, excuse me, sorry. Let me just, run this again. Okay, so, okay, so when I click on this, now, okay, it pushes onto the stack, right? So now this detail page of the student is on top of my list view, right? The root view. And now here I get this back button for free. I just click on it and it goes back. And remember the whole like the long press thing I was talking about? So if you long press here, you could see like a list of all of the like prior like views and stack states basically. So I can click on here and it goes back to the root view. Um, it's like that. So how do we do that in the code itself? So if we go here, this is the content view, and this is basically the list right here. So you can see here, we have a list, and I'm looping across all the students, and I'm getting the students here, right? And again, this is what we've seen before in lecture 3. Now, how do we make it so that when I tap on each of these students, it pushes a new detail view? Well, that's via this navigation link. So here, I could supply a title, and I could supply a value associated to that navigation link. So here I'm getting the student name, and here I'm passing the student data struct or instance into this navigation link. And so here on the navigation destination, this view modifier here, what happens is that when I tap on this navigation link, it detects what value was being pushed. And in this case, we're basically saying if the type of the data is a student right here. So again, the student.self means the type. So we're saying if we press on this navigation link, right, and this navigation link is associated with this value, which is of type student. And here we can see that we have a navigation destination that basically says, oh, if the value or type being pushed is student, we push this view. Okay. And again, this student that we get back here is the one associated to this navigation link. So now we get back the student that we pressed, and then we could show this detail view, which is the one that we just saw. Okay, so that's basically it. So, and also here, we're not just limited by a simple title. You can also supply your own custom view. So one of the another, again, there's a lot of different navigation link uh, versions. So for example, here, you could supply a destination here, like your own custom view here, and the label would be sorry. So here again, you could supply again. There's another way you could do it is that you could supply a like I could bring student detail view here, and I could basically do a like a custom label or the row view. Um, so that's another way you could do it as well. But yeah, that is basically navigation link and how you could use it in conjunction with navigation destination. Okay. And so, all right. So now how do we programmatically add things onto the navigation stack, right? So what I mean by programmatically add, I mean using code to push things and pop things. So here we create a navigation path. And navigation path works conjunction with navigation stack. And as you can see here, this keeps track of whatever is the state of the navigation stack. So what's currently pushed, like what's currently on the stack, basically. So here we pass in a binding into navigation stack. Now, why is this a binding? Why do we pass a binding? Remember that we can, as the user, we can go back to a previous view, right, with the back button, and that pops off the current view from the stack. And so in SwiftUI, in Apple's internal code, when we do that, it will remove the one from the navigation path. Okay, like I guess the most recent one from the navigation path. Okay, for us. And remember, this binding allows navigation stacked to not only read the value of navigation of nav path, but also to write back to it. Right. So that's why we pass a binding, so that when the user goes back, it modifies navigation path for us automatically. Right. Okay. So when we take a look at let's see. Okay, here we see. Okay, so another UI kind of navigation thing is the toolbar. So as you can see here, the toolbar is usually located under the safe area. And so iOS, what safe area means is like the area where you shouldn't have UI, because that's where the system or operating system elements are located. For example, the notch, the battery indicator, the time. This area is one of the safe areas. There's another safe area down here as well. Now you could also ignore these safe areas using the dot ignore safe area view modifier. But usually the toolbar just sits right below it. So the toolbar encompasses the area region right under the safe area here. And there's kind of like three main spots where you could put UI. One of them is top bar leading. And that is basically this area on the left, and top bar trailing, which is the one on the right. And again, why is it not left and right? Well, because of some languages like Arabic and Hebrew, they're read from right to left. So leading would be right and trailing would be left. So it's reversed. Okay. There's also another item or area called principal. So if you do two bar item, again, a two bar item basically is, for example, a single item on that two bar. You could place it anywhere, right? So actually, let's take a look at what options we have. So I could place this two bar item on the bottom bar. You could also place it in it. There's different other system configurable like placements like cancellation, confirmation, the iOS automatically determines. There's principal, which is basically the middle of the toolbar, and there's much more. But usually you will use top bar leading, top bar trailing, and principal. So and then in the toolbar item, you basically place usually like a button or if your custom view, right? And so in this case, I have a button that basically, you know, uh, it's a plus icon and it presents this sheet, which is presenting. So basically, when I press on this button, it presents this sheet where I can add a new student. And so, how do we create a new sheet? It's via this sheet view modifier. So all you need to do is create dot sheet, and excuse me, it expects a binding, and whether this binding is true, it will show the sheet. If it's false, it will dismiss the sheet. So as you can see here, I have a state variable that keeps track as a Boolean, whether it's presented or not. So when I click on plus, this toggles it. So this toggle method is basically saying if it's currently false, we change it to true. If it's true, change it to false. So it's toggling the value. So when I click on the button, this is now true. So we present add new student view as a sheet. Now, the convention is that you should present your sheets as a like a detail view. It shouldn't be something like for example, in this case, we're adding a new student, right? That's like a modal kind of user interface, right? It's not the principal content that we're showing. It allows us to augment the data, or like edit sheet, or sometimes apps use this as like a settings page. So again, there's different ways to use a sheet, but you shouldn't use a sheet as like your primary user interface, right? It's just to show data temporarily and you can dismiss it. Cool. So, all right. Now let's go back to, okay, so this was the leading, and then the trailing here is this graduation cap here. And this graduation cap, what happens when I click on it? This another view gets pushed onto the stack. And this is just basically a random major. And I go back here to pop it off. So how do we actually do this, right? Because we're not using navigation link here. Instead, we are programmatically adding it to the stack. So here, when I press this button, I get a random major from my view model, and then I append this random major to the navigation path. So I add it to the very end. Now, what type is random major? It's simply a string. Okay. So it's a simple string that gets pushed onto the stack. And here I have another view modifier, navigation destination, that says if the type that we're pushing onto the stack is of type string, we get the value that was being pushed, and you could show your detail view here. Okay. In this case, when we programmatically push the string onto the navigation path, or basically the stack, it detects it, we get the value back, which we can use within our detail view, and we show it, or we push that detail view on top of the current view. Does that make sense? Okay. So using navigation destination, you're able to programmatically observe, like, okay, you observe what the data type being pushed onto the stack, and you could show different views based on that value. And you can also get the value back for your detail view purposes. Okay. Another thing here is that, again, a lot of apps now, they have like usually like a title here, right? This is simply the navigation title view modifier. And sometimes you want this navigation title to be in line within the top toolbar kind of thing. So you could also change that visibility, or sorry, that mode using navigation bar title display mode. So you could set this to be either large, which is what it is currently. You could also set it to inline. Let's take a look at what inline does. Uh, I think iOS 26 does something differently with inline compared to before. I think it should just kind of okay, there we go. Okay, so it's like, no, inline within the toolbar itself, right? So this kind of works great, for example, if you have like a sheet, right? Because on a sheet, you don't want to have a big title within your sheet, right? It should be usually it's like inline within the toolbar. So that's what you should use. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of a quick view or tour of navigation stack. Again, it might be a bit confusing at first, but once you kind of understand like how does navigation path works with a navigation stack, right? And how we can programmatically add things to the navigation path to update the stack itself, and how we could use navigation destination to basically observe what type of data that's being pushed onto the stack and show different views according to that type of data. Okay. Any questions so far about this? Does this make sense? Okay. Okay. Awesome. All right. So let's talk about some presentation options that we have in iOS and also other platforms. So another presentation element is something called an action sheet. I think this is a bit more rare, but in some apps you might have seen this before. Before in iOS 18 and prior to iOS 26, the action sheet shows at the bottom. And usually it's like confirmation options. Do you want to delete or do you want to confirm or things like that? But in iOS 26, it looks like an alert kind of thing where yeah, you have a title, you have description, and you have different actions that you could act upon. Alerts, I think we've seen alerts pretty much everywhere. Usually have a title again, you have description, and again, you also have different kind of action elements where you want to cancel, you want to confirm, you want to do some whatever action you want to take. And alerts are usually used when you want to get the user's attentions right away. It's something like critical. It's something that you want to make sure that the user, do you want to confirm you want to delete your account, or do you want to confirm you want to add it to your calendar or something, right? So here we have another presentation kind of element. It's called a page control. This is actually there's no separate SwiftUI view for page control. It's actually built into tab view because what these are basically different tabs. And so on tab view, you can actually add a view modifier that basically changes it so it looks like this UI. And this basically displays a row of indicator images, each of which is representing a page. Now we have seen this every day, right? Has anyone seen this page control somewhere? Where do we find it? Like open your iPhone, it's the first thing you should see. You should see it. Well, it's just a bit hidden now, but um it is I'm sorry, let me, oh God. Uh, so if I go to my home screen, right, before, I think this was changed in iOS 2016 or something. Um, but if I hold down on it, this is the page view right here. This page control. And these are basically tabs, right? This is a tab, here's a tab, here's a tab. Right? Actually, let me show it to you right now. So I remember how to do it. So here on tab view, you could do something called tab view style. And then on the style, I could say page. And the index display mode is, I believe, is like the indicator things. Let's do always. So let me rerun the app itself, and the tab view should now be a page style thing, I believe. Um, oh shoot, I don't know where where to go. Uh, oh, let me see. Okay. Maybe it doesn't work on the root one, but let me see. I'm missing something. Okay, that's weird. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there, but that's how would usually do it. Um, wait, what? Tab view. Okay, I don't know if it's like with iOS 26 or something. Or maybe this is the root view. You can't do that on the root view. Maybe you have to do it on like a view within like content view or something. But that's how we usually do it. I don't know if it's iOS 26 or it does something weird, but um anyways, all right. Okay, popovers. Popovers are like you've seen these pretty much on a Mac OS and also on iPad OS. They're usually it appears on above content and it's like tied to something. It's there's an anchor. So this is like this anchors on top to a specific view itself, right? Um, and we have scroll views. Scroll views is like a list, but it's a bit different. So you can think of a scroll view as a list, but there's no like you know how a list kind of formats it with a nice border. It has like the content that you put on top of it. It has like it has a background to it applied automatically and stuff like that. It's just a list, but with a fewer features. And you could also specify the axis of whether you want this scroll view to scroll vertically or horizontally. And we also have sheets, like I mentioned before. It's a sheet helps people to perform a scoped task that's closely related to the current context. For example, in this Notes app, when you highlight something, right? And I believe when you click on, format on this highlight, this kind of sheet appears with more contextual controls that you can act upon whatever you're selected or whatever thing you're selecting on. And with iOS 17, there's an API where you can specify the height of the sheet. So before the sheet was always full screen, right? Or basically full screen. But with iOS 17, there's an API where you can specify the dedents. So whether you want it to be small, medium, or large. And those are system defined, but you can also specify using fractions. So you can specify fractional dedents where you say, I want this sheet to be 30% of the screen height, or I want this sheet to extend 45% of the screen height. So you could also do that rather than just using the system small, medium, large defined dedents for you. So a sheet has these kind of three. Again, there's a lot of different variations of sheet they could use. But this one, I think, it's probably the most common one. Basically, the main thing that you need is presented, and you give it a binding. Basically, if it's true, we present it. If it's false, we dismiss it. Dismiss. You can also use on dismiss, where when the sheet is dismissed, you could run something or perform some action. And the content closure is basically content of the sheet. And remember when the last argument, or sorry, last parameter here is a closure, we could use something called trailing closure syntax. So, for example, here, right? Let me rewrite it. So I'm using all closures. So sheet is presented. Okay, this is my is presented. Okay. So here it has again, it takes in two um it has two parameters, right? Is presented and content. This is a closure. This is basically a function. I could write the same thing using like an inline using an inline closure like this. Sorry, like that, right? And here I could add my student view here. But since this is the last parameter of sheet and it's a closure, I could bring this out. So I could rewrite the same thing using is sheet is presented content. Okay, is presented. And I can click enter and it Xcode just basically, removes this content parameter and brings the closure outside. And this is called trailing closure syntax. And again, these two are the same exact thing, right? But it's just I prefer using this over this. It just looks cleaner. Um, and if you notice, right? If you look at VStacks and all that stuff, let me see if I have VStack here. Okay, VStack. Do you see this thing right here? Like, do you see we have spacing here and we have this bracket? That's closure. That's a function. So if we look at the definition of VStack, so if I do option click, uh, you see content. It's a closure. So VStacks, HStacks, ZStacks, they're all closures. And what you're basically putting in here is, again, this is a function that VStack has. You're basically giving this as a function into VStack, and it basically does all this magic behind the scenes. Okay. So that is the trailing syntax closure. This is basically an argument to the VStack function, basically. Does that make sense? Again, it's a bit weird, but all of Swift UI are just basically trailing closure syntax, which is really cool. Again, group, right? Well, what is this? This is a function. Like if I control, sorry, option click to go to the declaration. Um, okay, maybe it doesn't show it here. Oh, there we go. Content, parentheses, returns a content. This is a function. This is a closure. But since it is the last one, you could bring it out. So now it's just group and then the brackets. And since there's no arguments, right? You just omit that. And so it's just like that. So again, everything that you see in Swift UI is a closure and functions in themselves, which is pretty cool. Anyways, um, alerts, it's pretty much similar. You have a title that you could use. You could have is presented, actions, which is basically buttons that, give the current available data, message, which is the alert body text. Again, you could just go to Swift. Like again, we don't have time to like in depth show you, but you just search it up online. For example, mm, for example, like Swift UI alert. And usually now, I think Apple has done a better job of providing documentation. So for example, here, right? Well, this is how you would show a really simple alert, right? And if you want to have more actions associated to your alert, like try again, delete, whatever, this is what you could do. You add a primary button, secondary button, and so forth. So Apple has, again, like documentation of how you would implement these. Because sometimes, even me, when I create alert, I don't remember all of the different, there's so many different ways you could create alert. So I just look at this and I was like, oh, okay, and then just like use it. So yeah. Mm, uh, so a scroll view is again sort of it's basically a list, but has fewer functionality. And one of the things with the list, sorry, a scroll view is that it loads all of your data into memory. Okay. But a list, instead of unlike a scroll view, a list caches. So basically, if there's items that are not visible on your screen, a list will basically remove those items or cache it away so that they're not in memory. And as you scroll, it will basically reuse some of the rows and then reload the data into the list. So it's more performant. So one of the takeaways is that a list is more performant than a scroll view because scroll view, because if you have a thousand items in your scroll view, it's all in memory. Whereas in a list, it basically only shows all the visible items on your screen in memory and everything else is out. It's not in memory. And basically it loads it as you scroll. So this is basically a score view. Here, basically, I have a VStack of all the different items, and you could specify the if it's vertical or horizontal. Using here, there's an argument where you could say, I believe axis. You could specify dot horizontal or dot vertical. I think I pretty much covered that already. Yeah, I think I pretty much covered. Oh, here, okay. Here's an alert. Here's another way we could do alert. Yeah, here's the title presented, and here are basically the actions. So I have a button where I showed OK and it dismisses it, and here's the body of the alert, right? It's very simple. Okay. Um, all right, and that's basically it. So extensions allow us to add extra custom functionality by extending or adding basically functions, properties to an existing type. For example, we used extensions to create our own custom view of modifiers. Tab bars allow you to provide entry points for a specific section or discrete tab. We use navigation stack to allow us views to be pushed, popped on top of the view hierarchy. We could programmatically navigate using navigation path by appending and removing things from it. There's a bunch of different presentation options that SwiftUI gives us. Most notably alerts, scroll views, and sheets. And yeah, there's a Apple has something called the Human Interface Guidelines or HIG that is basically a website of all the good practices and kind of philosophy of when you would use each element or UI elements. So for example, if we especially if you're a designer, if you're interested in design, this is a really good resource. So you get Apple Interface Guidelines. So if you go to this website, you could see it has a bunch of great resources. For example, uh presentation, right? Here's action sheets, right? And it has a lot of great best practices of like when you use it, how does it look on different platforms, right? And so this is a great reference when you're designing your app. All right, so let's do our Kahoot.